Some lessons in life, they don't arrive gently. They show up in moments of instinct, in split-second decisions, or as warnings. These are season 1 stories about awareness. It was November 2009 in Polk County, Florida, and I was a reporter stepping into the story of a poor man who won millions of dollars in the lottery. But this wasn't a rag to riches fairy tale. It was now a missing persons case, and it would curdle into something far darker. The man grew up poor in Lakeland, Florida, about an hour from Disney. Though his childhood, yeah, it was the opposite of magic. While other kids were riding Space Mountain, this little boy was trying to survive. He left school at 11 years old, barely able to read, because his family needed another pair of hands. And then at 40, lightning struck. He won $30 million. Now on paper, those numbers, they meant freedom, but in reality, they marked the beginning of trouble. But that's not the story that I ended up chasing. He wasn't a winner anymore. He had vanished without a trace. When I arrived, the media, we found ourselves orbiting this woman who called herself his financial advisor. The moment she opened her mouth, something in me, it just recoiled. It wasn't just what she said, it was how she said it. She was too sure of herself. And her confidence also, it didn't fit her face. And I was confused. Why was she the one speaking for him? I mean, why not family? Why not a friend? Someone who actually knew the man behind the millions. And then just like that, the Florida heat dissolved, back where I would get my answer. You see, I grew up in 2 worlds. In one, my parents, immigrants with thick accents and thin bank accounts, they were dismissed. I watched people slow their words and talk down to them, treating my parents like they didn't deserve the same respect as everyone else. But in the second world, I was treated like I had the golden ticket. No accent, lighter skin, and a last name that got mistaken for Italian more often than not. Costello? No, I'd say Castillo. But by then, the doors, they had already opened. And that childhood taught me a really hard truth. Power isn't always earned. Sometimes it's handed out based on snap judgments or lazy assumptions. That experience gave me this sort of X-ray vision. I learned to spot the people being pushed aside and the ones doing the pushing, and usually with the kind of confidence that comes from believing that they are superior. So there I was, decades later, I'm now a reporter, sweating under the Florida sun, when this woman rolls up in an SUV and her designer glasses, just ready to charm the cameras. And she shares this video with us in which the missing man is saying, "Everyone just wanted my money." And she tells us, he disappeared on his own. I mean, and this is why. Ugh. The confidence. I mean, she was telling us this after she drove her fancy car out of his home that she had now moved into. I mean, she acted like she was untouchable, like she could show up with all this evidence in plain sight, and she could still talk down to all these people who are trying to find him. I mean, the boldness, it lit a fuse in me. I grabbed my microphone and I cut through all the questions with one of my own. Look, I asked this way too early, and I was way too blunt, and I was way too biased. "Did you kill him?" She said, "No." But she couldn't look at me in the eyes. You know, it took years before the truth finally clawed its way out. Police arrived at a home in Plant City, Florida. It's a quiet farming town just 40 minutes from Disney World, and it's famous for its annual strawberry festival. But now, this place would make national news for something far less sweet. A hydraulic hammer slammed into the concrete driveway of a home. Again and again, until the ground gave up its secret. Beneath the slab was cruelty at its purest. Police believed that when he confronted her, she shot him twice and buried him under that concrete slab. A judge later sealed her fate with a conviction of first-degree murder. But the real crime, it began much earlier. She met him offering to write a book about him. That was her way in. And then she became his financial advisor, quietly, taking control of his homes and his money. She didn't just see a lottery ticket winner. She saw a man who couldn't read the documents that she handed him. And that's the truth that I learned as a 10-year-old. The cruelest kind of confidence preys on the easiest vulnerability. He may have been marginalized his whole life, but that didn't make it right. Looking back, the predator relies on society's trust towards confidence. We assume the person who looks the part is telling the truth. So your defense begins when you stop trusting that performance and you start fact-checking the confidence. In other words, learn to see the word con in confidence. I was 13 and I had a phone. Not a cell phone. This was 1990. This was a corded landline, the ones that were fixed to your house. I know, at that point, everyone had one of those, but I had my own phone, and not everyone had that. Which in the world of a 13-year-old back then, that meant absolute power. So this is my little sister, Vanessa. She's 7 years younger than me. We're both upstairs. I'm in the front room. She's in the middle room. She's playing with her neighbor friend. And suddenly this neighbor kid is in front of me trying to get my attention. I look at her. I'm annoyed. She's 6 years old like my sister. What do you want? And she's standing there totally calm. She points towards the middle room and she says, "Your sister fell." Well, I don't hear any emergency sirens, so I'm thinking, fell like, whoops, she tripped on a toy, fell? So I do what any responsible, okay, maybe not responsible, 13-year-old would do. I turn around and finish my conversation. But then I turn back around and I cover the receiver and I ask, "Fell where, kid?" The girl just calmly, again, points towards that room. So I drag this corded phone with me towards the middle room because obviously I am not hanging up. I step in, I look around, no sister. Where is Vanessa? The neighbor kid sticks her hand through the open window in the room. The second story open window. And as calm as someone reading the ingredients on a cereal box, she says, "Out there." I said, "Out the window?" My blood went cold, and the rest in my brain is sort of slow motion. I'm holding my phone. The phone slips from my hand. My head shot through that window. Oh. 2 stories? And that's when I got the full story. Vanessa, being 6, had looked down at the concrete and asked, "I wonder if we can fly." And her friend, who I guess is also not the sharpest tool in the shed, was like, "Me too, let's try." And then came the moment that still has me smacking my forehead. The friend says to my sister, "But, you first." Oh my God. I I ran down the stairs, through the living room, out the back door, running like Olympic gold medalist Usain Bolt on Red Bull. All the while, I am thinking, my sister is about to die. She's 6, and I'm supposed to be her babysitter. I'm not ready for this because, oh, if she dies on my watch, I am dead. I'm not just dead. I'm in front of my mom explaining what happened to her precious child. And have you ever faced a Hispanic mom and her wrath? I would rather wrestle a bear while it's hangry. And then I saw her. Vanessa's over there crying like she just saw a scary movie, but not crying like I'm in pain. She was fine. Not one scratch. And I'm like, wait, how did you survive that? Well, it turns out she landed on the metal basement cover and she just bounced off like it was some sort of trampoline. And I'm over here ready to call the coroner. My face probably was ghost white for the rest of the day. Now, years later, I realized this wasn't just a ridiculous story and a ridiculous situation, but it's also kind of a blueprint for adulthood. It's a lesson about who to trust with the important stuff. Looking back, we often hand our lives, our feelings, our decisions about careers to people who aren't even qualified to pick out their own socks. When the stakes are high, you need an amazing co-pilot, because in the end, no matter who is saying, "You go first," you are the one that is making that jump. So make sure that you pick an amazing co-pilot. Or at least, you better have a trampoline waiting below. It was just past 1 o'clock in the morning in Allentown, Pennsylvania. The summer air was thick and the heat felt suffocating. An exact match for my life at the time. I had just left a party on 2nd Street and I was walking home alone. I was utterly alone in a town buzzing with whispers about a 15-year-old who had disappeared just weeks before. Her bike, left abandoned along the street, that was the first sign that something was terribly wrong. But that night, my mind, I was a teenager, barely registered it. I was somewhere else in my head, lost in my own thoughts. I kept running my fingers through my curls, fresh from my perm. Then I remember I regretted it. It was tight. It looked like Richard Simmons, that 1980s fitness icon. Now, it doesn't look so bad here, but that's because I washed the perm solution while it was still setting in. So it settled into this weird, half-committed combination of straight and curly. That whole year, it just felt off kilter anyway. My father now lived an hour away. My mother spent 2 hours every day commuting back and forth from work. And so by necessity, the weight of the home rested on my teenage shoulders. It was like a boulder that wanted a permanent seat. And with my mom getting home late from her long commute, I became the family cook, usually serving up a very, very well done steak because I almost always burnt it. I also had to help cover some of the bills with my part-time job. And on top of everything else, I became the caretaker for my annoying little sister. That's a lot for a teen. So yeah, I dipped out that night. While my mom was asleep, I went to a party. At the time, I didn't care about the risk. Please, I just wanted a break. Sure, the dangers outside existed, but I didn't understand their gravity. At least not at the time. So I'm on the walk home, And I hit the halfway mark, and it's the county jail. And I remember looking up at it, and I would later realize that the town's biggest threat that night, he wasn't inside that jail yet. And I would also later learn that I was walking that night literally through his hunting ground. That 15-year-old girl that I mentioned earlier, who went missing, she was murdered while delivering newspapers for the town's paper, The Morning Call. And he didn't stop with just one murder. He was a serial killer. At 17 years old, he became the youngest serial killer in Pennsylvania's history, killing 3 females and attacking others who survived. He primarily targeted young women and teenage girls, usually alone. One of the victims that summer was just a 5-minute walk from where I walked that night. 5 minutes. I was a teen. I was alone, just blocks away during those summer months when this serial killer was out there hunting and still free. Thank God that fate spared me. Not because I was smart, not because I was aware, but because I was lucky. That night has taught me countless immediate lessons, and I always think about those victims and their families. Their suffering is a profound part of my memory. Looking back, my need to escape that night, it was an impulse to run from my life's burdens. The instinct to avoid our problems, that's universal. It's that slow realization that our marriage is over, not in a fight, but after years and years of avoiding one hard conversation. It's that doctor's phone call about our health because we put it off until it was too late. Every time we close our eyes to what's real, we take one step closer to something that we may never recover from. So what are you avoiding right now? If these stories leave you with anything, let it be this: see clearly, ask questions, and choose wisely. Thank you so much for being on this journey with me.